Given your long involvement in shaping South Africa's democratic journey, how do you think Heritage Day can move beyond symbolic celebration?
So you're thinking today's Heritage Day,
Yeah.
and okay, for the whites it's Pride Day, and funny thing, I don't mind that, but it shows a certain shallowness, because for most of, say, us whites, culture is you buy a ticket to see a performance, and the energy is on the stage, and if you're a very good spectator, you shout and you jump up and so on. So culture is something out there, it's part of the commercial world. A huge breakthrough for me was now when I'm joining the Defiance campaign and I'm going to the Grand Parade and political meetings, and sometimes they could go on forever, but there'd always be singing. And one voice would start, soprano, and then the basses would come in. Within 2 or 3 minutes, 4-part harmony, and beautiful singing. And it's not beautiful singing for the sake of beautiful singing. It's saying, who are we? Who am I? What do we want? How do we connect up with each other? And so culture now is ceasing to be something you learn at school, to sing in tune, and the tonic solfa, I think it was called, and to get the notes right. And then dancing, we'd go to Arthur Murray, left, right, left. We didn't have much money for that, so I never learned to dance left, right, left. And here are people now, maybe with standard 4 schooling, the men standard 6 schooling, and they're singing beautifully, but in a way that's saying, we exist, we are here, we're connecting up with each other, we have dreams, life's going to be better. So that is like integrating it. And my view on heritage is that integrated sense of heritage, of who are we, how do we connect, what are the meaningful symbols and things. Heritage in white South Africa would be old buildings. And it was strongly connected with European origins. We used to be called Europeans. And when somebody came from the United States, they didn't know which queue to get into because they were non-Europeans. And they'd be told, no, that's for non-whites. Move over to the European side, although you're from North America. So heritage then was very much associated with the castle and Simon van der Stel and old buildings. I spoke the other morning at assembly in Rustenburg Girls Junior School, and they're very proud of the fact that the original building was from Simon van der Stel. And I kind of smiled because the principal now, her name is Peterson, and she comes from a community whose great ancestors would have been slaves there and not part of the Simon van der Stel family. But if they like the connection, if they're liberating the connection, so much the better. But for me then, the heritage is, when people say LB was a human rights activist, I wasn't a human rights activist. I was a freedom fighter. And it's a huge difference. And I love human rights activists. It's great that they exist now. And when you've got the vote and you've got rights and so on, to be a freedom fighter, I'm not dealing with any political party or anything now, takes on a different meaning. It doesn't mean you have a code name, you go underground, you meet secretly, doesn't mean you can be thrown into prison without trial, doesn't mean you can be subjected to sleep deprivation, doesn't mean your books are going to be banned. But it's a different relationship with culture, with people, with movement and so on. So for me then, the richest parts of our culture relate to the resistance to oppression. And not simply the political story, but the human story. Right now there's an enormous controversy in the United States about the African American Museum, and the complaint is there's too much about slavery. Anybody here been to the African American Museum? Right, if you get a chance, go. Because it was the time when George W. Bush was the president and the money was coming from the government. So it wasn't going to be a lynching museum. It wasn't going to be a museum of pain, of flagellation, of humiliation. They made it into a museum of survival, adaptation, emergence, and finally elements of breakthrough. It's very moving. They've even got a little bit of painful bit of Cape Town there. A ship with 400 enslaved people was wrecked between Second and Third Beach. They weren't called Second and Third Beach then. Clifton. And 200 of the enslaved people survived. 200, they were shackled, they drowned. Those who survived were sold into slavery. It was like if you've got diamonds or silk, cotton or clothes, and it's in a box and it survives, it remains the property. They remain the property of the owners and became part of the community now. It was afterwards classified as the colored community, the Mozambicans over there. And we had a ceremony. It was raining, so they came to the home of Vanessa, myself in Clifton for the ceremony. We met Lonnie Bunch, who's the director. Americans sometimes have names that are funny for us. Is it Lonnie Bunch or Bunchy Lonnie or Barama Abak or Barack Obama? So he was Lonnie Bunch. And they took a bit of plank from the San Jose 1794 slave ship, and it's become the foundation pivot of the whole basement of that museum. The transatlantic slave trade. It starts with that. But again, it's not a horror story. It's a horrible story, but not a horror story. It's told in a way, when I was there, the majority of people visiting the museum, and you have to queue up, you have to book in advance. Imagine a museum, you have to book in advance. And the majority would be African Americans, and the elderly people with their grandchildren. Now, if it was a lynching museum, they're not going to bring their grandchildren to see that. It's so horrific, it's so painful. But they're seeing that story then of the transatlantic slave trade, information given. It's more than just like a heritage. It's us. It's the them. And the them as a crucial part of the US of A. Not just the them as an enslaved people transported from their homes, denied their original languages, their names, their freedom and so on. They, and you see afterwards, built the railroads throughout the country. They provided, through the cotton fields and others, the economic foundations of the US. So it becomes then a sort of an active heritage, and a very, very beautiful one, and a very, very moving one. Now it's in crisis, of course, but that's their problem. They're going to have to deal with it. But the line I just read today from the administration is, of course, slavery was horrible. You know, like people used to say, of course apartheid is bad, but, and the but becomes bigger than the of course part. And more emphasis should be put on how far we've gotten away from that. And of course, how far have African Americans gotten away? Many have gotten away from that very, very wonderfully. But there's still millions living in ghettos and without the wherewithal of others. As they say, the past isn't just the past, it's still with us. So I'm using that in a way as something of an analogy in South Africa. And then maybe let me conclude. Last night I went to the Artscape, and the team was Hilton Schilder. And I was hearing from my friend Steve Gordon, who gave up his studies at UCT to become totally involved with the community music movement. And he's telling me about the Genuines. And the big contribution the Genuines made was that Esku Guma. Are you not from Cape Town?
I'm not, but I'm aware of the genre.
Yeah, Guma. So Guma was like disdained by the activists. Guma was seen as part of what used to be called the Coon Carnival. Black people, people of color, prancing around for whites to take photographs of them. And he rescued Guma. And Guma. And you know, whenever there was a Guma moment, the whole audience got involved. Now for me, that's heritage. And with all the contradictions of heritage, that's something that was maybe taken over by those in power, culturally in power, and people from the poor communities having fun for 2 days in the year, dressing up, and okay, if the whites take pictures of us and they're happy, so be it, you know, we're having fun in our own way. The politicos being very angry, and now this artist, this cheeky artist, this creator, is saying, hey, no, this is from the people, the descendants of slaves, who created a music that had very strong origins from elsewhere in Africa, from the East Indies, from South Africa, and it's going to be part of the revolution, part of the struggle. Guma, guma, guma. And it was very exciting to see, and in that sense, very appropriate for Heritage Day.
Thank you, for that, for your perspective on this question. I would like to bring format, just briefly, Talia, if I may. Helen, you asked me a question at the end of our walkabout. I gave a walkabout this morning on this members. I'm sorry to do this to you, Helen, but your question was really important, for me at least. It had something to do with how your generation, LB, did the work of fighting for our liberation. And then people like myself and others who do this work of remembering South Africa's history, but also doing the work of remembering as a way to kind of like plot the way forward in optimistic terms that don't just want to kind of like do away with the past, but work with the past in order to tell a more beautiful, comprehensive and holistic story about South Africa's future. But we are not kind of contending with the same kind of difficulties as your generation did. So we end up like working with these, like with this material, with these histories. But yeah, like our challenges are not the same. And so we're living in this like era where the freedom that you guys fought for, we're now enjoying the excesses of, right? So yeah, so I asked myself this question today, like, it's like we're living, unexisting, like doing this work at a museum as a curator, but then the cause and the purpose is not as strong as your generation's cause and purpose was. So I just thought I should bring this question to the fore, because it's one that in working on the exhibition, I was thinking about. Like, I feel like you guys were more purpose-driven perhaps than we were, but of course we don't want the same conditions to be repeated. So it's like, I think it's something that I'm thinking through and grappling with, like what else can be done? I mean, we're not asking for the same conditions to be repeated, like I said, but like what is the way forward for South Africa's like youth. And I think it's a question that you asked Tabang at the opening. What are your aspirations for South Africa's youth? Where we're living in like this age of like freedom, but it's like a lack of direction that we're like we're living with. Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's easier for me. This is for me the year of Albie. And I'm suffering from Albie fatigue. And I can't wait to be 91. But I'm also loving it at the same time. So I'm looking back. And 1989, I made 3 statements that turned out to be significant. The one is, all revolutions are impossible until they happen, then they become inevitable. And it just seemed impossible for us to break down the system of white supremacy. And the alternatives were white supremacy or chaos. And we broke down the system of white supremacy. It doesn't mean whites still aren't historically unjustly better off than black people. They are. And that's very worrying. But now it was like, oh, it just happened, came to pass. It didn't come to pass. We fought for it, and we needed sharp intelligence, and we needed to advance on all fronts. And sometimes you move back and sometimes forward, and it was huge. So I live in my body, in my mind, in my consciousness. If I'm optimistic, it's not just because I've got good genes, if you can have optimistic genes. We pulled off what seemed to be impossible. And the whole world thought it was impossible. Racial bloodbath inevitable. And we've got a country. I look at you now. I'm so jealous. You're wearing that nice T-shirt. I haven't even got one.
It's got your name at the back.
Yeah, okay. And I'm speaking now to the curator of an exhibition in an amazing building. If I'd said in 1989 that one day I'd be sitting in a chair speaking to a youngish black guy who's a curator in an amazing building, they'd have called in the psychiatrist, they would have said, you were doing it. Malcolm, mad, you're crazy. So every time I meet someone like you, every time someone like you asks me a hard question, the harder it is, the more proud I become. I can't lose, you see. Because you ask me a question I've got no answer to, then I'm overwhelmed with joy. Because you're so smart, you're the new generation. Anyway, that was the one statement I made. Another statement I made in 1989 is the paradox of our lives, is we are fighting with all our passion to create a boring society. And I was able to say that because I'd been in Mozambique after the revolution on phase, and they did amazing things there, and our country owes so much to them, including the loss of their president, who was killed by South African security. We have no doubt about that. But so many things became ordinary details of life when you see all the difficulties. But I was pleased that we're not living in a society where you put yourself on the line, where you get blown up and lose arm, sight in one eye, where you're thrown into jail, where you have to make those choices, and you have to worry also about your children and other people close to you. You worry about if you're tortured, will you give away names? It's such a joy not to be involved in the epic. Sarah recently said it was captured on film that maybe we need fewer heroes and more courage amongst ordinary people. So we don't have the heroic, and I'm glad we don't have the heroic. I'm glad we don't have to put up with the pain. We forget about the traitors, the people who broke, the sometimes tunnel vision that so many of us had. It was easier not to think deeply about things, about the betrayals. It was, in that sense, it had a huge negative side. What it means then is more thinly spread courage, but more widely spread, more choices. And you're asking me now in the center of such almost voluptuous expressivity, and I'm not speaking about the Albee collection, just as place and space. This is part and parcel, and you need courage to do that. You've had to take decisions along the way, working with your team. That couldn't be easy, but you need a certain manner of work, a certain level of trust, and in the end, sometimes just your conscience to go ahead. Have I given you the three things that I said? I know, and the third one was we must stop saying art is a weapon of struggle. Now, I've been saying for 25 years art is a weapon of struggle, and sometimes it could be brilliant art, Guernica and the peace stuff, by great artists. Sometimes it would be, or so often we'd see the drawing of an African woman with a baby on her back. You don't see it so much today. In those days, African women carried babies on their back. Maybe when you're doing domestic work, it's the only way you could manage it, I don't know. And then an AK-47 in that one hand. I feel such ambivalence about those images. It's a kind of pseudo bravado, and it is inappropriate to have a baby on the back in an AK-47. That's part of the tension, but it's not shown to show the tensions. It's shown to say our women are in the forefront of the struggle. Now, how did I come to make that statement? Can I go ahead with that? Yeah, because it's. And how did the theme Spring is Rebellious come about? It's easy. All you need is to be blown up, survive, and say, aha, hooray, hooray, hooray. The worst day of your life becomes the best day of your life. Will they come for me? Will I be brave? You're living with that all the time. They'd come for me, they tried to kill me, and I'd survive. For revolutionary, that's fantastic. And I've never lost it, since then. Now I don't care what people say about me. They can even call me bourgeois. Oh, we're terrified of being called bourgeois. Bourgeois was dismissive of kind of middle class, stuck-up people, bourgeois. And also you need a huge international campaign. You need underground resistance, armed struggle, mass mobilization, all those different things. Then you get the courage to say we must stop saying art is a weapon of struggle. A very specific incident promoted that. I was out of hospital. I wrote my Self-Vengeance of a Freedom Fighter, describing what it's like to wake up without an arm in the context of struggle. I'd written the story, literary agent loved it. I'm in the United States, I've been teaching at Columbia University for a few months, and I'm invited to speak at the House of Culture, Kulturhuset, in Stockholm. They've given us a lot of support in the struggle, and they said they're having an exhibition, 4 Angolan artists, 4 Zimbabwean artists, 4 Mozambican artists, and 4 artists from South Africa. Will I give the opening address? Not longer than 45 minutes. I get an email, 4 emails there maybe, telex, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. By the time I arrive there, I'm down to 5 minutes. So I'm feeling a little bit irritated by that. And why? They are very community-based. And they had something like 20 different community art centers in Sweden. And the director of each one had to have their 5 minutes. So that scaled down my time. And what did they say? Art is a weapon of struggle. Culture is an instrument of struggle. Art is a weapon. They said nothing. So I started off by saying, we don't want your solidarity. This guy, we fly him all the way, and he says, we don't want your solidarity. And I said, you look at our art, you don't engage with it. You don't say, I like it, or I don't like it, or can you tell me more? You simply come out with a slogan. We don't want solidarity criticism. We want respect for our art by engaging with the art. So then they relax, okay. Then I say, we must stop saying art is a weapon of struggle. Now, I believe in free speech, and my banning order, I said, should be for 5 years only. So that's passed now. So anybody who says art's a weapon of struggle, they're not defying my banning order. But I was so disappointed. They weren't engaging with the art. And it's so easy to simply say art is a weapon of struggle. And the problem is not that it's mixing art and politics. You can't separate them. You can't separate them. Art always feeds into politics one way or the other, directly or indirectly. And politics can't exist without different forms of expression. It can be Heil Hitler, which is horrible and terrible. It can be a mindless salute. It could take many different forms. But people need symbols, and they need imaginative responses. It's how it does that. And what I was calling for then was a richer, deeper art. And I'm saying that for people who are politically conscious. Who is attending that conference? A certain Barbara Masekela. She's head of the Department of Culture inside the ANC. She was always called the sister of Hugh Masekela. She's slowly achieving a recognition for herself. And she says, Albie, that's fantastic what you said. We're having a conference in Zimbabwe on culture. Can you be there? I said, I can't be there. It's very heavy for me to travel, but I can send you a paper. And I wrote that paper, Preparing Ourselves for Freedom. And we all know where South Africa is. Do we know what South Africa is? Do we still look at our country with, trying to remember now, with ghettos in our mind? And in those ghettos, you know who the heroes are because they're all good looking and brave and wonderful and perfect. And you know who all the villains are because they're all ugly and stupid and clumsy and horrible. And it's impoverishing our art. And you'd think people in the ANC never make love anymore. When they go to bed at night, instead of making love, they discuss the future of the white working class. Now, I'd actually met somebody, she told me, that she said, Albie, I'm so unhappy. She said, all the men speak about is the future of the white working class, and I'm interested in horses. It was actually a real story. And I'm told the paper created such a storm at the conference, I wasn't there, that instead of making love that night, they discussed the Albie Sachs paper. And so the idea was to not